Ever felt something coming before you even knew why? Well, on that morning of shy sunlight, Pedro, an ordinary guy, 32 years old, with a scruffy beard and brown eyes that carried an unease he couldn't quite explain, walked along a golden sand beach, the salty breeze messing up his hair. He was like you or me, you know? An accountant, single dad, always juggling bills and time with his son, Miguel, 7 years old, who ran ahead, laughing, bucket and shovel in hand. But suddenly, the boy stopped, stared at the horizon and said, in a voice far too calm, "Dad, the sea's gonna swallow everything today. You're in Tales of the Watcher, where fates are glimpsed, not told, and every step you take is seen by eyes you'll never meet. The air hums with secrets, daring you to listen. Stick around, subscribe for the journey, and in today's story." That line cut the air like a blade, and Pedro felt a chill run up his spine, a psychological tension he tried to brush off. The sky was clear, waves broke gently, seagulls cried in the distance. Everything normal, right? But Miguel's eyes, so serious, so fixed on the sea, planted a seed of doubt. Was it just a kid's imagination? Pedro laughed, nervous, and ruffled his son's hair, saying, "All right, champ, let's find some shells before the sea decides to play monster." Deep down, though, something whispered that this premonition wasn't just a childish whim, and if I told you that hours later the ground would shake and the sea would pull back, like it was taking a breath for something bigger. Pedro didn't know, but that moment on the beach, that comment from Miguel, was the start of a growing mystery. As the sun warmed the sand, he scooped his son up, feeling the weight of a hunch he couldn't explain. He looked to the horizon, and for a moment, everything went silent, as if the sea itself was holding its breath. And now, what was buried in Pedro's memories, in his son's innocent games, was starting to surface. Was he ready to face what was coming? Pedro got back to the house, a simple place in a small coastal town, the smell of salt and seaweed clinging to faded curtains. The living room, with worn furniture and the tick-tock of an old clock, seemed calm, but an unsettling atmosphere hung, heavy, like the air was charged. Miguel, still with sand on his feet, dashed to his room, beach bucket tossed aside, and started drawing, giant, dark waves swallowing stick figures. Pedro, scratching his scruffy beard, stopped to look and froze. In the corner, in messy letters, Miguel had written 06/7/2025, "Good grief today." How did the kid come up with this? Subtle clues kept popping up, and Pedro, rattled, tried to stay calm. In the kitchen, Miguel's favorite blue fish cup was out of place, left on the edge of the sink, almost falling, like someone moved it on purpose. He swept the house, the wind outside howling low, and noticed an old photo of him and Miguel at the beach, tilted in its frame. Had he bumped it? The psychological tension grew, squeezing his chest. Just the exhaustion of a single dad. Late bills or something more, something Pedro, stubborn as he was, wouldn't admit. Days rolled by and Pedro's unease snowballed. He dreamed again. Black waves, a deep roar, waking him sweaty, heart pounding, fumbling in the dark to check on Miguel. The boy slept, peaceful, but come morning asked, "Dad, has the sea talked to you yet?" Pedro swallowed hard, gave a weak laugh and said, "What's that, champ? Too many cartoons." But deep down, Miguel's premonition nagged, a persistent whisper stuck in his head. And that night, a storm for Pedro. While washing dishes, he heard a snap in the backyard, sharp, like branches breaking under invisible feet. He raced to the window, pulse racing, and saw only shadows flickering under the dim streetlight. He took a deep breath, tried to calm down, but then found a note in Miguel's backpack, childish, shaky writing. "The sea's mad, Dad. It's coming." Where'd this come from? Pedro tucked it away, hands trembling, and watched his son, playing, oblivious, giggling, with a toy car. The doubt dug deep and Pedro started noticing everything. The living room radio hissed, even when off, spitting static like distant whispers. A cold breeze slipped through a cracked window, carrying a damp, almost rotten smell, as if the sea was inside the house. He checked his phone, nervous. Forecast: clear day, calm sea. Lies, right? The premonition haunted him, growing, and Pedro felt a weight, like unseen eyes on his back. Weeks dragged on, and Miguel would pause his play, stare at nothing, quiet, like he heard something beyond. Pedro, worn out, tried to focus on routine, school drop-offs, rent payments, but the angst ate at him. One night, the living room clock stopped, stuck at 11:10, no reason why, and Pedro, chilled, muttered, "Coincidence, that's all." But as he turned off the lights, a sound came from the yard, a low, wet murmur, like steps on damp sand. For a moment, everything went silent, and then a faint creak, almost a sigh, slipped from the back door. Who or what was lurking, watching Pedro and Miguel, waiting to show its claws? Pedro, heart in his throat, decided to dig deep, unable to bear the psychological tension crushing him. He tore through the house, rummaging dusty drawers, and found an old notebook of Miguel's full of drawings, huge waves, people running, and in the middle, a clock at 11:10, just like the one in the living room. Man, how was this possible? He stayed up all night, eyes burning, rereading his son's note. "The sea's mad, Dad. It's coming." Could Miguel, at just 7, know something Pedro, blind to the daily grind, missed? Next day, Pedro, dead set, went for answers. He knocked on the neighbor's door, old Mrs. Clara, an enigmatic woman who'd lived there for decades, her gaze always piercing. "Kids feel what we forget, Pedro," she said, voice raspy, handing him a yellowed newspaper clipping, a 1995 story about a tidal wave that wrecked the coast, dated 06-07. He froze, the paper shaking in his hands, and stammered, "But, Miguel, how does he—" Mrs. Clara just shook her head like she held a bigger secret. Then came the twist, and Pedro's world seemed to crumble. In the notebook, amid the drawings, a handwritten note said, "The sea pulls back before it swallows, 11:10, be careful, Dad." But the living room clock, stuck at that time, was ticking fine when Pedro checked again, like it mocked him. Doubt swallowed him. Coincidence or a growing mystery? He felt the air thicken, a psychological claustrophobia closing in, the house walls whispering, "You won't escape." And I ask you, ever stop to think what splits the real from the impossible? Pedro, scratching his beard, paced, chest tight, while Miguel played oblivious, humming about the sea. Was time that tricky beast toying with him? Or was the sea alive, sending signs only the alert catch? The gripping tale of Pedro's life turned darker, and he, lost, clutched the notebook, rereading every line. A noise outside, a sharp snap, broke the quiet, and Pedro raced to the window, breathless. Weeks crawled by, and Pedro lived on edge, eyes sunken from sleepless nights. He started noticing things. Seagulls vanished from the sky, the wind smelled. Stronger, damp, almost choking. He grabbed his phone, searched tsunami signs, and read, "The sea retreats. Birds go quiet." Man, was this it? He looked at Miguel, sketching another wave, and felt the weight of 1,000 unseen eyes. The premonition from months back that the sea's gonna swallow everything pounded like a drum in his head. Pedro, drained, sank onto the couch, notebook open on his lap, and for a moment, everything went silent. Until the radio hissed, again spitting a low murmur, almost words. He shot up, heart racing, and ran to the yard, flashlight in hand, seeing shadows dance on the sand. Something glinted there, half buried, a small, odd object. maybe something Miguel found at the beach. Pedro knelt, pulse pounding, and as he touched it, a chill cut through him. What was he about to uncover, and could he handle the truth? Pedro, heart pounding, held the object from the yard. A small, strange shell, its grooves like a jumbled map, pulsing with a growing mystery. It was night. The wind howled outside, and he, sweating cold, ran inside, locking the door like that'd hold back the chaos. Miguel slept in his room, face calm, but Pedro felt the psychological tension crush him, the air thick, almost suffocating. He glanced at the clock. 11:09. Man, the time from the drawing. The note was closing in. Suddenly, the ground shook. A low roar rose from the sea, and Pedro, in a panic, grabbed his son and bolted outside. The little coastal town turned into a stage of immersive suspense, and Pedro, breathless, saw the unthinkable. The sea pulled, back fast, bearing a muddy bottom, fish flopping on the sand. "The sea's gonna swallow everything, Dad." Miguel's premonition from months ago exploded now in an anticipated climax. He held the boy tight, brown eyes wide, and ran for the hills, heart racing as sirens wailed in the distance. Shouts echoed, cars honked, and Pedro, desperate, looked back. A giant black wave rose on the horizon like a monster waking from an ancient sleep. And then chaos swallowed it all, a breathtaking sequence. The wave crashed fast, toppling kiosks, dragging cars, its deafening roar drowning Pedro's yells. "Hold on tight, Miguel!" He stumbled, icy water hitting his legs, and then a wooden door, torn from somewhere, floated near. Pedro tossed Miguel onto it, pushing against the current, muscles burning, fear driving him, and suddenly a crash, glass shattering somewhere, and everything went silent. For a second, before the sound of destruction roared back, Pedro, exhausted, clung to the wood, Miguel crying softly, and fought to reach higher ground. The water rose, muddy, full of debris, and he felt the shell in his pocket, like it was screaming something. The premonition came true. The tsunami, foretold by Miguel, was real, and Pedro, torn between panic and strength, swam for their lives. He spotted a roof, half submerged, and with one last push, hoisted Miguel up, both shivering, soaked. The sea raged below, devouring the town, and Pedro, gasping, held his son, heart in pieces. A sudden revelation cut the night. That shell, found by Miguel on the beach, seemed alive, warm in Pedro's pocket. He pulled it out, hands shaking, and saw tiny markings, almost a warning, as if the sea had spoken to the boy months ago. Water slapped the roof, cold biting, and Pedro, staring at the chaos, saw distant lights, maybe rescue. He whispered to his son, "I'm here, Miguel. We'll be okay." But then, a sharp sound like a door creaking open alone amid the debris made Pedro snap his head around, pulse racing. Pedro woke amid rubble, body aching, mind foggy, no clue how he got there. Miguel, miraculously, was beside him, clinging, alive but scared, eyes full of tears. The shell was still in his pocket, warm, almost burning, and Pedro, stunned, stared at the sea, now calm, treacherous. What had happened? The town was ruins, and he, lost, felt a chill. The premonition saved them. But at what cost? And in the silence, a strange glint, from something half buried in the mud, caught Pedro's eye. What else was the sea hiding, waiting to be found? Pedro, worn out, sat amid the wreckage, body battered, scruffy beard caked with mud, holding Miguel, who trembled but, by a miracle, was unharmed. The emotional impact weighed like lead, relief at surviving, guilt for not listening to the boy sooner, and a knot of unanswered questions in his throat. The sea, now calm, lapped at the broken coast, leaving shattered homes, flipped cars, and a piercing silence. Pedro took deep breaths, brown eyes teary, whispering, It's okay, Miguel. We made it. But deep down, doubt gnawed. What if he'd paid attention to the premonition from the start? The shell, still warm in his pocket, seemed to pulse, and Pedro, heart heavy, pulled it out. Tiny markings, almost a code, glowed in the faint dawn light. It was a clue, a growing mystery, as if I, watching it all, left a trail to unravel. What did it mean? Pedro tucked it away, hands shaky, feeling he'd saved Miguel from the tsunami, but at a cost. The town was gone, and he, adrift, bore an unexpected consequence. He gazed at the horizon, the sea deceptive, and thought, what would you do if you could rewrite the past? Days later, Pedro, still shaken, walked flooded streets, helping neighbors, chest full of anguish and hope. Miguel, beside him, pointed to something in the mud, a strange necklace, dark stones, shining like it called to him. The premonition from months back. The sea's gonna swallow everything, warned of the tsunami, and by luck, Pedro ran. In time, climbing the hill, saving his son. But the change was huge. Their lives, the town, all turned upside down. And I ask you, quietly, ever felt eyes on you, like something or someone knows more than it says? The necklace, cold and heavy, felt alive in Pedro's hands like the sea had spat it out to tell another tale. He stashed it, pulse racing, sensing the story didn't end here. Guilt ate at him. Could he have done more? But the relief of Miguel alive warmed his heart. Pedro looked at the boy, who gave a fragile smile and murmured, "Dad, the seas, still talking." A chill ran up his spine, an immersive suspense taking hold, and Pedro, restless, gripped the necklace in his pocket. And if I told you this necklace, lost in the wreckage, might carry the next premonition? Pedro, unaware, held something that could find another, someone like you, to warn of what's coming. Pedro and Miguel's story changed forever. The tsunami a jarring end, but the sea held secrets. Here's a tease. What would you do if you could rewrite the past? Think about it. Share your theories in the comments. Tell me if you felt the weight of being watched by something bigger. For a moment, everything went silent. And Pedro, eyeing the necklace, felt a shiver, like unseen eyes followed him. The sea, calm now, hid more, and that necklace, gleaming in Pedro's hand, could be the key to another soul, another warning, another story. The tale goes on, and I, always seeing all, wait for you in the next chapter. What's the sea whispering now? And is Pedro or you ready to listen? This is Tales of the Watcher, where shadows tell what eyes dare not see. Until the next story, keep watching.